For fans of 90 Day Fiancé, few things are more explosive than the word betrayal. Add a secret romance. Add two cast members from the same season. Add a husband allegedly left crushed. And suddenly, the internet has a blockbuster storyline. That is exactly what happened around Julia Trubkina, Brandon Gibbs, and Florian Stacey. A dramatic headline began circulating suggesting that Julia and Florian had a secret true romance, while Brandon was portrayed as the devastated husband who had supposedly been betrayed. It is an irresistible reality TV premise, but there is one major problem. The evidence does not establish that Julia and Florian were secretly romantically involved. What the evidence does establish is already dramatic enough. Julia and Brandon entered 90 Day, the last resort with genuine marital problems. Julia ultimately admitted that she had cheated on Brandon twice during their relationship. Brandon struggled with trust. The couple confronted major disagreements about children, intimacy, family, and honesty. Florian and Stacey Silva were simultaneously dealing with their own serious relationship problems. And because Julia and Florian were part of the same cast, they naturally interacted. At one point, Julia posted a collection of memories from the show that included a photograph of herself with Florian. Fans immediately began debating the image. Some viewers thought they looked unusually close. Others thought they simply looked like friends. Some even said the two looked more natural together than Julia and Brandon. That fan reaction became fuel for speculation. But speculation is not proof. And that distinction is at the heart of this entire story. Because the real story of Julia and Brandon is already complicated enough. Chapter 1. Who are Julia, Brandon, and Florian? To understand why a photograph between Julia and Florian could generate such intense speculation, we have to understand the history of all three people. Julia Trubkina became known to TLC viewers after moving from Russia to the United States to be with Brandon Gibbs. Their relationship was featured on 90 Day Fiancé, and their story quickly became one of the franchise's recognizable couples. Brandon came from a family farm in Virginia. Julia had lived a very different life. She had worked as a go-go dancer in Russia before moving to America, and the adjustment to Brandon's family environment created some of the most memorable tension in their early storyline. The couple eventually married in April 2020. For a while, they appeared to be doing well. Their social media presence often showed an affectionate couple enjoying life together. But television viewers later discovered that appearances could be misleading. When Julia and Brandon joined season 2 of 90 Day, the last resort, they revealed that their marriage had deeper problems than fans realized. Brandon himself acknowledged that what people saw online was not the whole story. In an interview with Pop Culture, he explained that their relationship looked happy on social media, but that they had serious problems underneath the surface and believed therapy was necessary. That admission changed everything. The couple that fans thought had largely escaped the chaos of the franchise was suddenly in relationship therapy. And then came the revelations. Chapter 2, The Problem Wasn't Florian. This is one of the most important points. When viewers hear the word betrayal, they may immediately connect Julia's marital problems with Florian. But the documented betrayal storyline actually involved Julia and another man, not Florian. During the last resort tell-all, Julia admitted that she had cheated on Brandon twice. Reality TV World reported that Julia confessed to infidelity during the tell-all, with the discussion focusing on what happened while she and Brandon were living apart as they waited for the K-1 visa process. That is a verified and serious part of the story. It is also precisely why the Florian rumor can be so misleading. There really was a cheating scandal. There really was a marriage in crisis. There really was a husband struggling to process revelations. But none of that proves Florian was the person Julia was romantically involved with. The temptation is to connect the dots because all three people appeared on the same show. That is how reality TV rumors grow. A real cheating story becomes associated with an unrelated castmate. Then a friendly photograph is treated as evidence. Then the rumor becomes a headline. And eventually people start repeating the headline as if it were confirmed. Chapter 3. Why Florian entered the story. So, why did Florian's name become part of the discussion? The answer is simple. They were castmates. Florian Stacey appeared on 90 Day, the last resort with his wife, Stacey Silva. Julia and Florian were therefore spending time in the same environment. They participated in group activities. They interacted with other cast members. They attended parties. They appeared in photographs. They were part of a large cast of couples going through therapy. And in that environment, friendships naturally developed. Julia was known for being social with other cast members. The show featured a group dynamic, not 6 isolated couples. That meant Julia could become friendly with Florian without there being anything romantic happening. Yet reality TV audiences are trained to look for hidden relationships. The franchise is built around secrets, cheating, exes, DMs, dating apps, hidden messages, secret meetings, and surprise revelations. So when viewers see 2 cast members looking comfortable together, some immediately ask, is there more going on? That is understandable, but it doesn't make the conclusion true. Chapter 4. The photo that started the speculation. The rumor gained attention after Julia shared a photo dump connected to her last resort experience. Among the images was a photograph of Julia with Florian. The two were smiling. They appeared comfortable. They stood close enough for fans to notice, and that was enough to ignite a debate. According to one report, fans on Reddit began comparing Julia's picture with Florian to photographs of Julia with Brandon. One commenter reportedly suggested that Julia and Florian looked more like a couple than Julia and her actual husband. Other commenters disagreed. Some thought they looked like siblings. Others argued that Florian simply had a naturally friendly relationship with women. That is the entire foundation of the secret romance theory. A photograph, fan interpretation, and the pre-existing knowledge that Julia had admitted cheating on Brandon. That may be enough for entertainment gossip. It is not enough to establish an affair. Chapter 5. The difference between chemistry and friendship. One of the biggest mistakes viewers make when watching reality television is confusing chemistry with romance. 2 people can have chemistry without dating. They can laugh together. They can pose together. They can tease each other. They can have an easy friendship. They can even look more relaxed together than they do with their spouses. None of those things automatically means an affair. In fact, reality TV editing can make this even more confusing. A 2-minute conversation may have been filmed during an entire afternoon. A photograph may capture 1 second of a much larger social gathering. A montage may place unrelated moments next to each other, and viewers naturally fill in the blanks. That is how narratives are created. Julia and Florian may have been friendly. They may have had a strong platonic connection. They may simply have enjoyed each other's company. There is no reliable evidence in the sources reviewed here establishing that they were secretly romantically involved. Chapter 6. The real betrayal that Brandon had to face. If we want to understand why Brandon was devastated, we don't need to invent a romance between Julia and Florian. The documented story is already heartbreaking. Julia admitted she cheated on Brandon twice. That revelation struck directly at the foundation of their marriage. Trust. Once trust is damaged, everything becomes suspicious. Where were you? Who were you talking to? Why didn't you tell me? What else don't I know? Were you honest about that? Were you honest about this? Those questions can consume a relationship. Brandon had to decide whether he could forgive Julia. Julia had to decide whether she could be completely honest. And both had to decide whether their marriage was worth rebuilding. The couple's therapy sessions were therefore not simply about one incident. They were about whether trust could be reconstructed. Chapter 7. Brandon's heartbreak. Brandon's reaction to Julia's confession was one of the defining emotional elements of their last resort storyline. He was not simply angry. He was trying to understand what happened. The difference is important. Anger can be immediate. Trust issues linger. A person can forgive intellectually and still struggle emotionally. Brandon had to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with information that changed his understanding of their relationship. And then came another problem. What else was there? That question is often more painful than the original confession. If someone discovers one secret, they may wonder whether there are 5 more. That is why honesty became such a central issue for Julia and Brandon. Chapter 8. The second secret. The cheating revelation wasn't the only problem. Julia and Brandon also had disagreements about family. One of the major conflicts involved children. At the beginning of The Last Resort, Brandon was ready to have kids while Julia had changed her mind. Reality T reported that this was a major surprise for Brandon because Julia had previously indicated she wanted a family. This disagreement was enormous. Wanting children versus not wanting children is not a minor marital disagreement. It is a question about the future. A couple can compromise on vacation plans. They can compromise on furniture. They can compromise on where to eat. But children are different. There is no halfway version of becoming a parent. That is why Julia's change of heart created such deep tension. Chapter 9. Julia's side of the story. Julia's position deserves to be understood too. Changing your mind about having children is not automatically a betrayal. People change. Circumstances change. Relationships change. A person who wanted children at May 25th feel differently at 30. A person who imagined motherhood may become frightened by the reality. And someone who has experienced health or fertility concerns may have complicated emotions about pregnancy. Julia eventually revealed that infertility concerns were part of her story. The emotional weight of that revelation added another layer to the marriage crisis. Brandon wasn't simply hearing, "I don't want children." He was hearing about a painful personal issue, and that required empathy. At the same time, Julia had to acknowledge that changing such an important part of their shared future could understandably hurt Brandon. The couple therefore faced two truths at once. Julia had the right to her feelings. Brandon had the right to feel blindsided. Chapter 10. Why the Florian rumor is so tempting. Now we can understand why the internet found the Julia-Florian theory so irresistible. Imagine the storyline from a viewer's perspective. Julia is married to Brandon. The marriage is struggling. Julia admits cheating. Brandon is hurt. Julia is photographed looking very comfortable with another male cast member. That male cast member is Florian. Florian himself is married to Stacey. Suddenly, viewers have a four-person relationship puzzle. Julia, Brandon, Florian, Stacey. It sounds like the perfect TLC storyline. But real life does not work like a television mystery. Sometimes a photograph is just a photograph. Sometimes a friendship is just a friendship. And sometimes the most dramatic theory is not the true one. Chapter 11. Florian and Stacey's own marriage was in trouble. There is another reason the rumor needs to be handled carefully. Florian was not a single man looking for a new partner. He was himself in a troubled marriage with Stacey. Their relationship had its own problems during The Last Resort. Florian's temper became an issue. Stacey questioned whether she could remain in a relationship where anger and communication problems continued. A reported incident involving a cast party illustrated the tension. Florian became upset over what he believed was a failure to personally invite him and Stacey to a gathering. Even after Julia and Gino attempted to invite them, Florian remained angry. Stacey reportedly criticized his behavior and said he was embarrassing her again. This context matters. Florian wasn't simply a mysterious romantic alternative to Brandon. He was a man dealing with his own marriage crisis. Chapter 12. The Group Dynamic. The Last Resort cast was essentially a pressure cooker. 6 couples, relationship problems, therapy, group discussions, alcohol, parties, arguments, confessions, jealousy, emotional breakdowns. The couples were constantly around one another. That environment naturally created friendships. It also created opportunities for misunderstandings. When people spend weeks together in an intense emotional environment, they can become unusually close. They share secrets. They support each other. They complain about their partners. They joke together. They form alliances. But closeness is not automatically romance. In fact, one of the dangers of reality television is that viewers can mistake intense situational friendships for romantic relationships. Chapter 13. What Julia actually admitted. Let's return to the most important verified revelation. Julia admitted cheating on Brandon twice. That is the real scandal. It is serious. It explains why Brandon was crushed. It explains why trust became a major issue. It explains why the couple needed therapy. And it explains why viewers were ready to believe almost any additional betrayal theory. But the available reporting does not say. Julia cheated with Florian. It says Julia admitted infidelity. That distinction must remain intact. A responsible article cannot take a confirmed admission and attach an unconfirmed partner to it. Chapter 14. The tell-all changed everything. The tell-all was particularly important because viewers had spent an entire season watching the couple's attempt to repair their relationships. By the time the reunion arrived, fans wanted answers. Who stayed together? Who broke up? Who cheated? Who lied? Who forgave? And what happened after filming? Julia's confession became one of the major moments. Reality TV World reported that she admitted cheating twice. That revelation reframed her entire relationship with Brandon. Suddenly, earlier disagreements looked different. Earlier moments of emotional distance looked different. Earlier conversations about intimacy looked different. Viewers began revisiting old episodes. That is another common phenomenon in reality television. New information changes the way audiences interpret old footage. Chapter 15. Was Brandon really crushed? The phrase Brandon crushed is dramatic, but emotionally it captures something real. Brandon was deeply hurt. He had entered the relationship expecting loyalty. He had built a life with Julia. He had moved forward with marriage. He had made plans. And then he discovered that his understanding of their relationship was incomplete. That can be devastating. But the story did not end there. Brandon had a choice. He could leave, or he could attempt to forgive. The couple ultimately chose to work on the relationship. That decision is important because it demonstrates something that viral headlines often overlook. The story wasn't simply, Julia betrayed Brandon. The next chapter was, what happens after betrayal? Chapter 16. Brandon threatened to leave. During the season, Brandon reached a point where he threatened to leave. Reality TV World reported that Brandon and Julia later experienced a breakthrough after he threatened to leave her. That moment shows how close their relationship came to collapse. But it also shows why therapy mattered. A relationship can reach the edge without actually ending. Sometimes couples walk away. Sometimes they stay. Sometimes they rebuild. Julia and Brandon chose the third option, at least for the time being. Chapter 17. The couple's surprising outcome. Here is the twist that destroys the most dramatic version of the rumor. According to later relationship status reporting, Julia and Brandon are still together. Swin's relationship update lists them as still together. The report says that they ultimately vowed to remain together after the second season of The Last Resort. It also reports that the couple later revealed they had become pregnant and subsequently welcomed a baby boy. People likewise reported that Julia and Brandon were expecting their first child together, describing the couple as entering a new phase of their relationship. So the current documented storyline is not. Brandon was betrayed by Julia and destroyed by her secret romance with Florian. It is. Julia and Brandon confronted infidelity and serious marital problems, chose to continue their relationship, and eventually became parents. That is a very different story. Chapter 18. The baby changed the story. The arrival of their child fundamentally changed the couple's narrative. For years, one of their biggest conflicts had been whether they would have children. Julia had expressed doubts. Brandon wanted a family. Then they became parents. That doesn't magically erase their previous problems, but it does show that their relationship continued long enough for them to reach a major milestone together. Their journey from, I don't know if I want children, to, we have welcomed a baby, is one of the biggest developments in their story. It also makes the secret romance narrative even harder to reconcile with the documented timeline. Chapter 19. What about the photos with Florian? The photographs are still worth discussing because fans saw them and because fan reaction matters in entertainment news. But we need to describe them accurately. Julia and Florian were photographed together. Fans noticed their chemistry. Some viewers thought they looked like a couple. Others thought they looked like siblings. Others viewed the relationship as a normal friendship between cast members. That is the evidence. Anything beyond that is interpretation. There is no verified source establishing that Julia and Florian secretly dated. There is no confirmed report that they had an affair. There is no documented confession from either person stating that they had a romantic relationship. Therefore, the responsible conclusion is, The romance theory remains speculation. Chapter 20. Why fans may have seen chemistry. Human beings are extremely good at reading facial expressions. We see two people laughing and think, they like each other. We see two people standing close and think, they're attracted to each other. We see one person looking at another and think, there's something going on. Sometimes we're right. Sometimes we're completely wrong. Reality TV fans are particularly sensitive because they are trained to look for hidden clues. A glance can become evidence. A caption can become evidence. An emoji can become evidence. A photograph can become evidence. But none of those things are necessarily proof. This is why entertainment journalism needs a clear distinction between what happened and what fans think happened. Chapter 21. The social media echo chamber. One social media post can now become dozens of articles. A fan notices a photograph. They post a theory. Another account screenshots it. A YouTube channel discusses the screenshot. A gossip website summarizes the YouTube video. A second channel cites the gossip site. And suddenly the internet contains 20 references to the same rumor. A casual reader then searches Julia Florian romance. They see page after page. They assume it must be true, but all those pages may ultimately trace back to one photograph and one fan comment. That is not independent confirmation. It is an echo chamber. Chapter 22. The word secret changes everything. Notice the power of the word secret. If a headline says, Julia and Florian pose together, most people won't care. But if it says, Julia and Florian's secret romance revealed, suddenly everyone wants to know more. Secret implies hidden evidence. It implies someone has been lying. It implies betrayal. It implies a cover-up. It turns an ordinary photograph into a scandal. But if there is no verified evidence of a secret relationship, then the word secret is doing all the work. The evidence isn't. The headline is. Chapter 23. What would actually prove a Julia-Florian romance? If a future report claimed that Julia and Florian had been romantically involved, what would we need? A direct confession would be powerful. A credible interview would matter. A documented relationship timeline would matter. Public messages verified as authentic could matter. Multiple independent reports could matter. But a photograph would not be enough. A friendly social media caption would not be enough. Fans saying they look good together would definitely not be enough. And a clickbait video would not be enough. The burden of proof should rise with the seriousness of the accusation. Chapter 24. The real relationship between Julia and Florian. Based on the available evidence, the safest description is, they were castmates who developed a friendly relationship during filming. That fits what viewers actually saw. Julia interacted warmly with multiple cast members. Florian participated in the group environment. Their friendship appears to have been visible. There is nothing inherently suspicious about that. The fact that Julia and Florian could laugh together does not mean they were secretly lovers. In fact, one of the most revealing details is that Julia's friendship network on the show extended beyond Florian. She interacted with Jasmine, Stacey, Sophie, and others. She was not isolated with Florian. That makes the secret romance interpretation even less certain. Chapter 25. Florian's personality. Florian is also an unusual person to place at the center of a secret romance theory, because his personality was itself a major storyline. He could be intense. He could become angry. He had strong opinions. His relationship with Stacey was frequently under pressure. During the cast party conflict, his reaction became one of the examples of the anger issue